What's up, everyone? Welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Video Game Fight School channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. Before I jump into the video, I just wanted to go ahead and give a shout out to all of the new subscribers that we've had and even new audience members. I really do want to say I appreciate your participation and I'm happy that you found the channel, and you're welcome to stay if you wish, and I hope you do stay and join in on the conversations that we have regarding Gotham Knights and other DC titles that we're looking forward to. Today, we're going to be looking at Gotham Knights in regard to the differences between the 2020 gameplay reveal and the 2022 gameplay reveal. This is going to be a little interesting because the 2020 reveal showed Batgirl and Robin, whereas we just got Red Hood and Nightwing. But there are a few things that we can talk about in regard to some of the changes that seem to have been made from both of them. Now, we do know that at the time in 2020, they announced that the game was going to be releasing on both that generation, last generation consoles, and also this generation consoles, hence the PS4, Xbox, PS5, and Series. But now it's only going to be the PS5 and Series and PC platforms that are getting the game. Hence, a lot of people are questioning as to why we're not seeing some of the things that we got in that very first cinematic trailer or gameplay reveal trailer that was actually narrated by Patrick Redding, who's the creative director. So first things first, we're going to look at the way the narratives went. The narratives for those two were actually done by two separate folk. One was Patrick Redding for the 2020 video game reveal, which had Batgirl. He basically talked about how she was actually halfway through the Mr. Freeze mission, his crime mission. I think that's probably something that clues us into how they're going to approach the bosses. And then he also mentions a few things about, Batgirl trying to make her way there. In the 2022 reveal, the gameplay, that was actually conducted and narrated by Jeff Eleanor. Jeff Eleanor is the game director and has been hard at work promoting the game, talking about playtests and stuff on his Twitter page. And it's really interesting to see how both of them really do approach the game differently in terms of their narrative. So jumping right in, we noticed that the way they started out the Batgirl gameplay trailer was her on a bat bike. We're going to use this particular sequence to compare the bat bike and the one that was shown in 2022. If you notice, a lot of people talked about how the bat bike seemed a lot more of a stiff mechanic with the 2022 reveal that was just done recently this month, and they compared it to the 2020 reveal and said, man, it seems like something is off. So I started to watch very carefully and try to analyze why both of them were different. And I noticed a few things that really did help them stand out in their own way. Number one, it appears that both players were using different camera distances for their own gameplay sequence. Now, I don't know if this is a setting that you can do by yourself and for yourself in the game, like an FOV slider, which is basically some kind of a field of vision that allows for the camera to help you see a wider area, in front of your player, or sometimes it could even be a thing that can help you see a wider area behind your player, depending on how you do the settings. This is available in some games in different formats. I haven't seen many that allows for you to see your player from a farther distance, but it could be that this is a setting, or it could be that they changed the default setting, and now with the gameplay reveal of 2022, they've decided to use a much closer camera. Either way, I think these settings were able to catch people's eyes and everybody was able to notice them. My personal opinion, I like the greater distance from the player on the bat bike, and even overall in general. I think this is something they really have to go ahead and take into consideration, because not only were the distance parameters set differently on the bikes, they also seem to have been set differently on the characters themselves. So perhaps the developers can give it as an option so that every individual player can customize the way they want, and I'm hoping that we get to see that the way it is. Another thing that really did make both of them stand out is the cinematic effects and the environmental state at the time that they were showing both characters. In the case of Batgirl, they were talking about Mr. Freeze using some huge cryogenic device or contraption to modify the weather. Hence, you had some snow in a sense, or they created a sense of the air being somewhat cold. So that particular set of environmental effects really played a huge role in how both presentations were. I have to also be very honest with you. Those environmental effects will be very heavy on your machine, your console or your PC, if they choose to release the game in that state. Now, I'm hoping that they're able to optimize it, because we shouldn't make that some kind of an excuse, because now we don't have the last generation of consoles as some kind of a limiting factor. The PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series consoles really are capable of going with the flow. If you give them a lot of work, they're going to be able to carry it, and all you need to do on your end as a developer is use some technical expertise for optimization. I mean, there are very good looking video games that implement solid weather effects that we can actually point to on these consoles. In fact, some of these games are older, and there's no excuse for them not to be able to bring those cinematic effects to Gotham Knights. And so this is something pretty cool. Another really interesting thing was the health bar system. The health bar system got taken away. Everybody saw this, and even the health numbers in terms of damage, this was quickly removed. I think it was the highest form of criticism from a lot of people. Most people did not necessarily want to see numbers flying as they did damage. I think in my past videos, I actually did a lot of comparisons, and I showed people that it looked very much like Assassin's Creed games. And I'm talking basically anything from Odyssey all the way to Valhalla, with those numbers just flying off the character. Now, this has also been done in other games as well. There's not just saying it was only Assassin's Creed, but I don't think people were in the mood to see that in a Batman game. We've been used to the Arkham setups where you don't need those numbers, nor do you need a health bar. You just understand the different impact of the hits that you actually deal to the players. And then another really interesting thing that we got to see was a counter system show up in the 2022 game reveal. That's the one that was just done recently. And this was some kind of a circle that was appearing on, maybe I would say, the weapons, or if an enemy was trying to hit you, you saw like a little circle. Sometimes it was a white little symbol that showed up that you were about to get hit. And I think this is something that they decided to implement to potentially mimic the enemy hit indicator like we got to see in the Arkham games. If you play the Arkham games, when an enemy was about to hit you, there was their anticipation animation that played slightly slower sometimes, but most of the time, if you left that on, you got to see an indicator saying that you needed to either counter or dodge a hit that was coming from an enemy NPC. So you go back and you look at the way it's being implemented in Gotham Knights. I think it looked a little basic because the enemy NPC in this particular footage was trying to throw a Molotov at Red Hood, and it showed a red circle. I think that circle is to indicate that the enemy is about to throw this item and is going to hit that area, and maybe you needed to evade. But even before, there was some kind of an aiming signal from the enemy. Like the enemy tried to aim at Red Hood, and we got to see the enemy aim indicator. Now, this is not uncommon. Game mechanics usually use different kinds of indicators to tell a player that something is about to happen to them. But I thought that that was actually quite strange in the sense of using those crosshairs on the floor as an indicator that a Molotov cocktail was coming their way. In the other Arkham games, or say in other superhero games that we've seen, they usually use color coding to tell you what kinds of damage is coming your way, or maybe they use a general kind of indicator. Like if you say maybe Arkham Knight or Arkham City, if a character was going to hit you with an attack or with something that you could counter, say a projectile, you saw it in blue. Say if they wanted to throw like a little case or a gas tank on you, you could use your counter button, catch it, and then return it back to the enemy NPC. If they had a little shock baton and they were about to hit you, you saw red. Or if they had a shield, or if they had a knife, you could somewhat specifically dodge knife attacks, but knife attacks were actually indicated in yellow. So there are ways to do it that really makes it stand out and help the player to understand what's coming their way. But I thought that that was quite interesting that they showed it in the 2022 reveal, and it looked quite basic, whereas they didn't necessarily show too much of that in the 2020 reveal. Although in the 2020 reveal, they showed some kind of bullet indicator, like you were about to get hit with a bullet whenever an enemy NPC had a weapon on them. And I think that was kind of a cue, if you look very closely at this part here, where Batgirl basically dodges that attack. So all in all, I think these changes that they've made, in a sense, seem to have rubbed the community off somewhat wrong. I think the original look and feel of the game when they first revealed it has been imprinted in our minds so hard that we're going back and thinking to ourselves, man, what happened to that first reveal that we got to see? And I wanted to go ahead and make this video to point out those differences, because some of it were just environmental differences, camera differences, and pretty much UI differences that I think could be easily tweaked in a sense. I think they need to get their visual artists on board to, you know, kind of get things going, because already the mechanics are there. And like I've said before, the way Unreal Engine works, things are very easy. Once you've developed your core gameplay mechanics, you can actually go into those files or into those little systems and change cosmetic aspects with a little bit of ease. Now, the trick though, and I'm sure this is the case with many video games, is optimizing those visual effects to not break the game or cause frame drops like you saw in that particular 2022 reveal. If you guys notice, when Red Hood was fighting with that huge enemy NPC, the Quarter Vowels Titan NPC or whatever it is, and he applied that status effect, the frames of the gameplay just dropped drastically. And visual effects usually have a lot of tasks that they have to run in order for them to look good. But other video games have successfully implemented a lot of visual effects, and so I'm expecting that the team at Warner Brothers Games Montreal is able to, you know, go ahead and do something quite cool as well. They just have to do a lot of work. In my opinion, I think the final phase of this game is optimization. That's probably why they dropped the PlayStation and the Xbox versions, the PlayStation 4 and Xbox versions specifically, because optimizing a game for all of those is just so different. So now, if they're setting their sights on just optimizing for this current gen of consoles, then I think those effects, the cinematic effects and a lot of the lighting effects that really made the first gameplay trailer to look very cool and unique, might be warranted that they look into replacing them or putting them back into the game at the time that we're seeing maybe something in June or at release. In June at least, we'll probably be able to give opinions and they'll know how it hits, whether it actually hits the mark or whether it could use some more improvements. So, I mean, this is a really interesting process. I wish they had showed a lot more earlier so that they could get a lot of feedback, because it appears that they took a lot of the feedback from the 2020 reveal and they tried to implement some slight differences to the 2022 reveal. So it seems like they're listening and they're paying attention. But that's pretty much it for my video today. I appreciate you guys so much for watching. Thanks so much, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace out.